Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. This is Megan Morse, one of our product consultants here, and just want to start off by thanking you all for taking the time to join us today. In this session, we will be reviewing our suggested purchase order module, which we commonly refer to as SPO. All right, so as we get started here, just a quick introduction to our product consulting team. We run these monthly webinars and are assigned to each of you to help support you with any training or system questions that you may have, and you can always feel free to reach out to us directly if you need assistance in any of those areas. As a reminder, as we get started here, we do have everyone on mute to reduce any background noise. So we'd love this session to be as interactive as possible. We have some polling questions that we're going to have today, but you can always interact, send us questions and comments through the Q&A icon, which is located in the bottom right corner of the screen. You can just select those three little dots to expand out the menu options, and you can open up the Q&A window, which will be on the right-hand side of the panel. A recording of this webinar will be sent to you via follow-up in an email, so you'll have access to the link there, but you can always access any of our previously held webinars through our Freshdesk support site under the educational webinars section, or also on the Cognizant YouTube channel under the Digital Solutions Retail playlist. All right. So our agenda for today with suggested purchase order, we're going to start off with reviewing the benefits of SPO, and we'll also get into the SPO Hotlist and how you can use that day to day to manage your purchase orders. We'll then get into our vendor order review screen and the different purchasing methods and features that you have within the screen itself. And we'll also then be reviewing our Expedite Weeks feature before Stuart gets into the live screen demonstration. All right, so starting off here with the benefits of SPO. So suggested purchase order does provide several different productivity and fulfillment gains with the module. It's using rules-based automation to help provide you with a daily recommended requisition list. So this is for each of your vendors, and it is based off of your current inventory as well as your current demand needs. The primary focus of this solution is really to help reduce the amount of time that you and your users are spending on manual steps of creating requisitions, managing actions, using the what-if scenarios within the materials planning. It's helping to really streamline this whole process so that you can spend more time than focusing on other business needs, forecast accuracy, and other things that are more important. There are several SPO ordering methods to help streamline the replenishment process. And these methods are available not only to help accommodate just various business needs, but also to take into consideration product volatility. We do also offer multiple purchasing options within the vendor order review screen, and Janine's going to get into this in much more detail as we proceed here, but things like splitting out your orders, case pack rounding rules, as well as MOQs can all be considered in these requisition recommendations. And some of the key benefits within SPO is really helping to manage your overall supply chain costs. So it's taking into consideration freight optimization, how to calculate how full your containers and your truckloads are. It also helps with managing various vendor terms and discounts using the rules-based ordering. And one of the other nice features is the future cost management option. So if you do have the ability to interface over future cost changes that you anticipate or you know are going to be set up for the vendor, we can put those into the system, and then based off of the expected receipt date for that requisition, the system will pick up what that current cost for the vendor would be and make that a consideration in the requisition creation. There are also requisition approval limits, and this can be set at multiple levels. So you can set certain dollar thresholds where different manager approvals would need to be placed. And that's something just specific to our SPO module. All All right, so getting into the suggested requisition hot list. So this is where you would spend your time day to day. Just like all the other hot lists, it is updated on a daily basis, and it enables users to quickly access all of the suggested requisitions rather than just working a single vendor at a time. The hot list filter section, which you see up top there, you can filter on the typical things, your vendor and your buyer, but some of the key ones that we see when it comes to the requisition list is filtering by priority or status. So priority, for example, just to keep in mind, this is automatically assigned by the system, and it is based off of the first reorder value for that vendor. Requisitions, within this list, you can expand out a particular vendor. So you can see here I've expanded out the Danner boot vendor. And then down below, you have the ability to review all of the line items and the SKUs and the details. And then from here, you have the ability to approve or reject the entire order or specific rows as needed. Or what we see most of our users do is that they link directly from here into the vendor order review screen, so that you can further review the purchasing setup and make some decisions on how you want to take actions within those suggested requisitions. This is a dashboard element that you can make available. So if you have the module, it's definitely something that we recommend you have on your dashboard. So when you initially log into the system, not only does it provide you with easy access to the module and the hot list itself, but it also just gives you quick visibility to, what are those high priority items or requisitions that you need to address that day. A call out with some of the new fields that we have, and this is as of our latest release, the 2107 release. There are a few new fields that you can bring into this hot list. The first one is the user field. So down below there, you can see we have our various user fields, and this is the demo account. So you can see the demo setup that we have, but you can bring in any of your 28 user fields to help you with prioritizing and evaluating this hot list here. And then up top also to call out, we now have visibility to the total cost for the requisition from the hot list, as well as the PO validation. So whether it is passed or failed, and all of that is just based off of the vendor rules and the setup that you have in the system. Now we're gonna get into one of our polling surveys for today. So we did this last session, but if you weren't attending that one, just to give you a quick overview, this is something that Stuart will have it pop up here on the right-hand side, and it's going to be a polling survey. We're going to start off with just 2 questions here. All your responses are anonymous, so we just want to encourage you to participate here. The first question is going to be just a yes or no question, but do you currently use the SPO module? And then the second question is, if you do use the SPO module, what methods do you use? So Stuart's going to open up that poll here shortly. There it is. We have a minute to answer. So as long as you just submit your answers here and then you'll hit submit, it will take that into account, and we'll take a look at the results here together. So as we're waiting for everyone to submit their answers, there's just a quick table of our SPO methods. So there are 4 methods to choose from. And as we get into the session here, Janine's going to review these methods in detail, but just as a reminder, we have our single coverage method, our recurring coverage, and then also our reorder point and economic ordering quantity. So those are the 4 methods that you can set up within SPO. Right, poll is just wrapping up here, and we're going to see the results. So let me just pull it. If yours is, sometimes it gets cut off, so you can just pull the polling result to the left a little, and your panel will expand out more. So right now we have 14% that are using it, and 50% answered no. And then with the SPO method, it looks like our most popular method is the coverage method at this point. So we have the coverage at 14% and reorder point at 7%. And coverage makes sense because we do have both the single and the recurring coverage options within those. So we appreciate your responses here. I'm going to pass it over to Janine to continue with vendor order review.
Great, thanks Megan. Good afternoon everyone. So Megan had mentioned the suggested requisition hot list, and if you wanted to be able to drill down and take a look at the actual vendor and all of the information that's associated with the vendor. So this is called our vendor order review screen, or what you'll hear us shorten it to as VOR. If you happen to be a multi-echelon customer, you have a transfer order review screen known as the TOR. So this screen is not only accessed from the SPO hot list, you can access it from the other hot lists or launch directly, pardon me, from the master scheduling module into the VOR screen. So the screen is made up of two main panels. So this is a view of the top panel. So when you first come in here, so say you click through from the SPO hot list, it'll automatically default to the supplier, the vendor. You have additional filters that you can do. You can put in your scheduler. So if you happen to share vendors across your team, you'd want to obviously put in your own scheduler ID so that you're looking at your information. And then we do have destination warehouse. So for those of our multi-echelon customers that have multiple warehouse locations, you can then filter down to that warehouse location specifically that you're looking for. Additional filters, you've got the next review date. So if you implement those throughout the system, we give you that option to filter here as well. There's some additional filtering capabilities for those that are doing the transfer order reviews. We have expedite status, which Stuart will get into and explain. We also have the split option. So you can limit the number of lines that you want on a requisition, and it can split them into multiple requisitions for you. You can also split by brand. So if you see the next section underneath, the additional filtering is you can filter out by SKU status. And if you happen to interface brand as one of your product attributes, we also give you the ability to filter brands and ultimately split by brand when you're creating those requisitions. And then the last thing on there is multiple dates per requisition. And what this does is if you combine requisitions, and I'll get into that in a minute, that have different ETA dates, what it'll do is if you combine them all into one requisition, it will revise all of those ETA dates to be the same. So on the right-hand side is several tabs. The first tab, which it defaults to, are the suggested requisitions that the system does calculate. So this is based on the various methods that you choose and the values that you set for them. Each day when master scheduling runs, it then will populate the list of requisitions by vendor each day. The next tab is the history forecast graph. So if you're familiar and use that often in the product level forecasting screen, you also have the ability to view that in the screen as well. And then the remaining tabs are some of our SPO methods. So we've got the configure, coverage, the EOQ, and the ROP, which I'll get into. So when you have your list of requisitions, you always, as a user, have the ability to amend whatever the system recommends. So it's not something that's automatic. The system won't automatically create these requisitions for you. You do have to take that step to select it and create the requisition. But we ultimately let you make the final decision so that if you need to either decide you don't want to order something, or you want to change quantities, or you want to remove some of the items that the system's recommending purchase, you're free to do so.
Janine, we had a question come in that says, do we need to have multi-echelon for POS to work or to work best?
POS?
I think it means SPO.
Yeah, it's a typo.
Right. No, SPO is a great module all on its own. Multi-echelon is an additional module that is utilized for customers that have multiple warehouses, that you have a main warehouse and you have regional warehouses and you have stores and you're wanting to transfer inventory back and forth. That's what multi-echelon is for. We utilize the same format and screen to give you the ability to address your transfers by location. So that's the only reason why it ties into this particular screen. Great question. If you do opt to combine the requisitions, as I mentioned before, you've got two means of doing that. You can select a line for the requisition, you can drag and drop it to combine them, or we give you that option in your right click for your mouse. Thanks. All right, so the bottom panel of the screen is where you will see your entire product grid. So things to kind of call out here is that there's many data elements that you can look at to do your analysis that gives you kind of the lay of the land, so to speak. It's about 15 columns or so in the beginning. And then as you scroll out to the right, you have your entire planning horizon. So you'll see the individual weeks like you do in materials planning. So we highly recommend that you customize this screen, keeping the data elements that are most important to you as you're making your decisions. And then that way it's user specific. So you have your own view that you need. You can come in and it'll be defaulted to the way you need to look at your data. We also give you the option, you can choose which column you want to actually freeze, so that as you're scrolling to the right, you're not losing sight of your product information. We give you the ability to set your SPO methods in the top part of the screen, but we also give you the ability to do it in the product grid. So you might opt to have multiple SPO methods set across the products that belong to a vendor. So you can come in here and you can select the SPO method you want. You can recalc the screen to get immediate results to see what new requisitions the system would recommend for you. You have sort and filter capabilities. The filtering is quite extensive, so it gives you lots of ways to slice and dice the results that appear on the screen. You also can click on the columns like you do in your hot lists and things to sort ascending, descending. The other good thing about this is if you are really curious as to the quantity that the system is recommending, you can double click from the screen and it launches right into the materials planning window. So you can take a look at, POs that you have out there. You can review your demand, see if you need to change anything in your forecast. So we give you that ability as well. Okay, so I wanted to touch on what Megan had mentioned. So we have vendor rules that are accessed on the vendor maintenance screen, which you can access from vendor order review. And what's great about the vendor rules is you can have rules that are preferred. You can have rules that are a requirement. So we give you the ability to set these rules. So things like you have to have prepaid freight for your orders. You have a minimum order value that you have to place with the vendor. You might have vendor unit requirements that you have to meet. And so when you input these rules and you set the values of those rules and mark it preferred, what the system does is when it's calculating the requisitions for the day, it's going to take a look at that rule and flag it. If it's a preferred rule, it'll give you a warning. So there's a column in the grid of the suggested requisitions that it'll say warning. So that lets you know, okay, there's a rule against this PO. It'll still let me place it, but maybe I should take a look and see if I need to make any changes on the requisition to potentially hit that rule. Required means you have to meet it. So if the requisition, you have a unit minimum of 2,000 units, but the system's recommending you buy 1,500, in that status, it'll say failed. So you would need to go in, take a look at the rule and say, okay, I need to meet 2,000 units. So let me just increase my order to 2,000 units. And so this status was something that's been added to the suggested hot list, suggested requisition hot list. Say that 3 times fast. Other information that is on the suggested requisitions also is if you have the proper measurements and things that are we can enter into the system, it'll start showing you that these POs, how much they're filling a container, how much they're filling a truck, etc. And we do have a suggested requisition header report that you can also use in tandem with this if you are responsible for any sort of logistics and being able to combine orders to make a container to give your information like that to your freight forwarder or your agents or whomever you might be working with. All right, so we're going to get into the suggested purchase order methods now. So we saw that those that are using SPO coverage is the most popular. So we have two types of coverage. We have what's called single coverage and we have recurring coverage. So the single coverage is you're coming in here and you're setting values to tell the system to create a requisition for a said period of time and coverage of demand. And when you select these individual SPO tabs, on the left-hand side, you'll see a hierarchy that displays. So you have the ability to actually set an SPO method at a company level. And if that's the case, you can decide to inherit that across your vendors, products, etc. But if you opt to not do it at the company level, you can set it at the vendor level. Then as you drill down into the vendor, we let you do, you could set methods at a status code level. You could set it at the category level. You can set it at a lead time level. So we give you lots of variety and flexibility in deciding to do that. So the coverage method is best used with longer lead time items and imports. So I would come in here and I would determine when I want the coverage plan to start. So I have the option of starting at the lead time. So if I've got a 12-week lead time, it's going to start at week 13. We have first need. So you can have it start calculating from where you first have a need, or you even have the option to just specify a week you want it to start in the planning horizon. You then determine what's the demand coverage I want to be considered. So we give you the option to do the entire planning horizon, or you choose a total number of weeks. So in this example, I'm wanting coverage for 12 weeks. In requirements, you can say, yes, I want 100% of what that demand is. In this section, you could also hedge your bets if you wanted to. If you want to be a bit conservative, you could reduce that percent to 75, to 80, or whatever you want to do. We also give you the option to apply case lot so that you can round up if the quantities are greater than a percent. So if you get quantities that don't quite meet your case lots, you can put in a percent to say, okay, well, if I'm within 30% of that next case pack, go ahead and round up. And then a new option that came out in 2001 is giving you the ability to determine the delivery. So you can give it a set number of weeks that you want it to arrive prior to the first need. Whereas before it only was with the start week of where it would come in. So you can preference it to come in earlier if you want to get the goods to the warehouse early. So if you've got new product that you know needs to go through a QA process, you can say, okay, bring it in 2 weeks earlier and you're good to go. On the recurring coverage, let me just show you an example of what it looks like in materials planning. So the single coverage that I did, I wanted it to cover 12 weeks from my lead time. So that was my setting. So when you come into your materials planning, you'll see a number populating in the what if line. So when you open up the plus sign, it will then show you that 372 is coming from SPO, the suggested purchase order module. So I have it covering 12 weeks worth of demand. And then I utilize that new option of having it deliver 2 weeks prior to my first need. So I have need that starts in week 6. So I'm having it come in at week 4 in the planning horizon. So again, you have the option to drill down, take a look at this. Does this make sense? Yes, I like this. Then I could go ahead and check that requisition to go ahead and be placed. So the recurring is you have the same steps, so to speak, and you determine when you want it to start, how far out you want it to look, the number of weeks. But the difference between the recurring and single is recurring allows you to put out a series of purchase orders. So this is a really great method for stable, ongoing products. Your core items, you sell them all year long. They have a pretty steady performance. You could go ahead and set out a series of purchase orders. So if you wanted to, in this example, I'm looking at last receipt week, the entire planning horizon. I want 6 weeks of coverage. with a delivery interval of 4, which means it's going to take a look out there, look at my 6 weeks worth of demand, stage a requisition, and then it's going to look out for another 6 weeks and stage another requisition, etc. So it's putting out a series of orders for you. You have the requirements, again, 100% or hedge your bets. We also give you the option to do an overlap percentage. So you can have the weeks kind of overlap, the quantity overlap a little bit to give you a cushion if you don't use safety stock. So you have that option. And again, the apply case lot roundup, etc. Reorder point is best used for low volume or high cost items. So these are products that you, for example, you have a $10,000 item. You're not going to want a lot of those sitting on the shelf, right? So you try to order as minimal as you can. If products have a demand forecasting that's difficult, you have items that you just sell out on the web. They're not managed, every day. You have products that your call center calls and tells you you're out of stock and we've got back orders. Can you please get some on order? And it also can work in tandem with another SPO method. So if you have really seasonal items that during the season, you can have coverage in place, for example, but then in the off season, you can have our ROP fill in so that if you start getting low on inventory, the system will tell you to make sure and buy some to put them in stock. So we have 2 types of ROP. We have level and we have amount. So level, when you use this, is going to have you order to maintain a set inventory level. So in the example, if you set a trigger for 5 on hand and your quantity is 20, in the level example, the system's going to register, you're down to 5 units on hand, and you've told me to maintain a level of 20. So the system's going to recommend you buy 15 units because you always want to maintain 20 units on hand. The amount will tell you a specific amount to order. So again, I have a trigger of 5 units on hand. The system sees I have 5 on hand. My quantity value is 20. The system's going to suggest a requisition for you to buy 20 units. You get to align to lot, true or false, and you can have the roundup percentage as well. One of the other options with ROP is we give you the ability to upload directly through the dashboard. So if you have lots of products that you want to set an ROP method to, you simply open up the upload screen. You will download the template, which is an Excel spreadsheet. You will fill in all of the values that we require for the spreadsheet, and then you would simply browse to find that file that you've filled in, the template that you filled in, and then click upload. And it'll go ahead and consume that for you. And it does give you results to show if anything passed or failed. Typically, if it fails, it's because one of these fields has been left blank, or you might have a space or an odd character in there. And if that happens, you can certainly reach out to us and we'll be able to take care of that for you. So
to have an ROP question. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, Stuart.
So ROP does not look at any forecasts, only inventory levels.
That is correct. That is correct.
And especially if you have no forecasts, because you have something that doesn't have consistent demand, it will maintain those levels. So it's not looking at forecasts, only your inventory itself.
Exactly. Again, it's that perfect scenarios, those items that just sit out on a website that you're not managing, they're not part of your everyday assortment that requires, detailed analysis to take care of, but you are selling that product. So ROP is perfect for that. You don't have to babysit it. The system's just going to let you know it's time to order.
And actually, that combination method, in other words, if you have the SPO method set for coverage, but have the ROP flag, if you have demand, it will use coverage. When you have no demand, it'll use ROP.
Exactly.
Right. And that's why we have 2 columns, SPO method and SPO method applied, because of that one condition you have where there's demand or no demand.
Looks like we had another question. It will look at inventory, does not look at lead time.
Now, I think there's a parameter related to lead time, though.
For ROP vet, let me check that.
I believe so. Yeah, don't check it now. We could get back.
No, I won't.
Yeah. That's a good question.
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
All right, great. The last method is economic order quantity, or as we shorten it to EOQ. So this is best used with products that have high inventory, carrying, or storage costs. So what's important with this particular setting, and again, there's a different hierarchy available in each of the tabs. And with EOQ, you can set the criteria for the product. You even can set it at the SKU level. The data is made available to analyze your order management versus inventory costs, right? So you need to understand the item ordering cost, and sometimes this requires a conversation with your finance team. You also need to know what the holding cost is for that particular item in the warehouse. And what it's going to do is it's going to take into account, okay, what makes more sense to order for this particular product, because it wants to be the most cost-effective recommendation. So an example would be you have a small widget that has a short lead time and it's relatively consistent, and you tend to order once a month to replenish this widget. Well, it could be that due to these costs for ordering and storage in the warehouse, that it's more cost effective for you to buy 12 months worth of inventory and keep that one box on the shelf than going through and creating a purchase order as often as you want. So again, keep in mind that those values would be very different for a small widget versus a couch. So you don't necessarily want to set a blanket value for everything. You want to put some thought behind what you're using. The other thing to keep in mind too is in that example of where the system recommends I buy that box of small widgets to keep on the shelf, and it's going to be a year's worth of inventory, you want to think about turn too. So that's always a KPI that inventory is keen on. So again, you want to put some intelligence behind the values that you use here. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Stuart.
Thanks, Janine. Another option in SPO is to set up Expedite weeks. This looks at future on order. You want to determine if it should be considered or not. In other words, I don't want the system to recommend, and you could see in this example, the system would recommend 27 units for my coverage, but I have a PO coming in. So I don't want to be overboard if I have those purchase orders. So over here by vendor or at a top level, you could set Expedite weeks and say include all POs, X weeks of lead time. In this case, it's 8 weeks. You don't want to have it too far out, because what's going to happen is your recommended purchase quantity is going to be lowered because the system's saying you're getting in a PO. But if that PO is coming in much later, you might want to not consider it. You want to be able to order it now, if you could get it now, in order to capture those back orders. So it is a balance between buying correctly and economically and having those back orders. So materials planning, you could see the SPO quantity and the adjusted quantity. So in this case, 27 was needed, but 12 are coming in. So the adjusted quantity, or suggested quantity, would be 15. And we do have a Expedite list that shows in vendor order review, so you could see those purchase orders that need to be expedited. We also have an Expedite Hotlist, which is separate in the dashboard, which is really good because this is showing you by vendor all of the SKUs, all of the PO information that's being considered. These are the ones that can be expedited. We do not suggest suggested purchase orders or requisitions for these because these are coming in. This you could export to Excel, and it's just a great list to be able to contact your vendors to try to get these expedited and moved up. With that, I'm going to connect to a sample dashboard. Here you see within master scheduling, if you have suggested purchase order, you have a separate section here. Suggested requisition hot list, expedite hot list, and vendor order review. I'm going to go first into this SPO hot list. So there's a number of filters here. You could filter by location, you could filter by scheduler. There's also a column layout that you could save and customize some of these. System will show you the order and receipt date, quantity, number of products, the total cost. And here you could left click to filter on these if you wanted to see these large costs that are here. You could also see this PO validation that we spoke about from vendor order review. There's some warnings, and it'll show you the warnings. Some of these are preferred, meaning it's just a warning. Some are required. If it does fail, if you have failure under the validation, you will not be able to create the requisition. You would have to go in and make those changes because you don't have the minimum that's here. There's a number of different fields that are here. If you expand these, go in and expand one of these, you could see the SKUs that are here, lead time, total cost, and we now show all of the user fields. So you have all your user fields that are over here. There we go. Those are all the user fields. So that gives you all the information, or a lot of information you need to make a decision. Now, let's say I just want to go in to some of these and create the requisition directly from here. I could click a couple of these, go up here, and create a new requisition. Now we have two options. Auto will just create the requisition. You won't even see it. Manual will bring up the create requisition screen. Now you would use that if you have to put in some different, information. Maybe you have to put in ship date, maybe you have to make corrections here. And so you would come up, validate and save, and then move to the next one. I'm not going to save this. So this is where you're doing it directly from the screen. A lot of people want to go into what we call vendor order review. So that's the main screen, and you could get there from a number of different places. But I'm going to go take a look at this vendor, Cruise. I see that there are a number of items. SPO Methods Coverage, or ROP for this one. And if I click on it, it brings up the vendor order review screen. Now, before I get into the specifics of the screen, I just want you to notice this is what SPO does. Here you have 15 lines. It's for this particular vendor. Here's the total units and cost. I could expand this and see the SKUs. Now, without SPO, I would have to go to the hot list. So I go to the product hot list for this vendor. And then I could see, here's the ones with my short-term net need shortage. Here's my 15 items. I would have to go in to materials planning, do my what if, create a requisition, move to the next. Or if I'm using action, I would have to go in to my what if, create the actions for all of these, and then combine it. And my thought process is that I am covering a certain number of weeks, depending on the method that I'm using. So instead of doing that, SPO will do it automatically. It'll go in based on the settings and parameters and go in and figure out the units to buy. Looking at the different sections, Janine went through most of these. The important one here is the SKU status. Here I'm checking all of these. Typically, you wouldn't want to look at your inactive or discontinued, so you would only select that. Once you do that, that is a filter setting that's saved by users. So next time you go to this screen for any vendor, it will only show you your active items. But in this case, we're looking at all of them. Up here, you have your suggested requisitions. You could see the expected date, total weight, total pallets. If you put in parameters for container, it'll figure out the container and the container weight. So it gives you a lot of information that's here. Here's a history forecast graph that you recognize from PLF. That'll show you your history of sales and inventory. That's good information to have before you go in here and make some of these decisions. Configure coverage is where you would go in to configure the coverage, either single or recurring. We went through these options. Here you could see if this is highlighted in black, it means that a specific method was saved for this vendor rather than it being inherited from the top.
Stuart, we have a question. If the vendor has multiple factories, can you group by factory?
I don't know. Because you're saying because of the FOB. I don't know if factory is something that we actually bring into SPO or not.
Would that be a way to maybe get to that would be using one of the user fields?
Yeah, I would say, Janine,
Right.
We have clients that do use user-defined fields, and then they can sort within the product grid below by factory.
Definitely.
Right. Actually, here you have a number going in there you could customize, and you could see that we have all these user fields. So that is something that you could go in there and you could do filtering. So if you do filter, actually, let me bring one in, even though I don't have anything called factory. But if I added that to here, you do have the ability to do some sorting here, sorting and filtering. So if this was populated, you could do sorting, you could do filtering, and then you could go in and create the requisition for one factory and then the other factory. We do have PO split options, but I don't think it's split by anything defined like that. We have split by brand only. So I think the user field is probably the best way. But getting back to coverage, we went through these. You could set this by vendor. You could set this by status. Let me go to EOQ. This is where you could go in here and set the different EOQ that we spoke about. And then ROP. This is usually set at a top level, but you could set it separately for the individual SKUs. And then up here is your expedite weeks at set and expedite list. So just like the one on the dashboard, this will tell you these are the ones that we're expediting, so we didn't create requisitions for these. Down at the bottom, you have a large number of fields, and again, you would want to customize. Here's all the ones I didn't include. There are things like first sale date, we have average sales, things on MOQ, all of these user fields that are here, a lot that just give you information in order to go in and say, is this a good buy, basically. Here's where you set the SPO method. You can sort. So I could left click and sort by any of these fields. You could do ascending or descending. I'll do it ascending for now. Total cost. You also have filtering. So let's say on units, I don't want to pick anything less than, let's say 200. I can uncheck. Now take a look. It'll update this automatically as 11847. It reduces it. So anything I have here, I could take out, and I could do that by SKU, or I could do that by product. By any of these, I could go in and then select different things, and that will adjust what's up here. Over to the right, you have the different weeks, like you see in materials planning. Since it's coming in October 3rd, everything is listed here. I only have one requisition because I have the same lead time. If you had different lead times from a vendor, then you would have multiple lines here. And then you could either create it or you could group it together. So once you're here and you have this, I could go in and create the requisition. If I made changes, those changes would show. And then the requisition would come up and I could just create it from here. But notice, look how it included everything I needed from that vendor. I didn't have to go in, create actions, create requisitions. I could go in and make this adjustment. Plus, the system does catch things, basically. It goes in and says, you need this. It'll go in and suggest these. Here you could see with the expedite weeks, shows expedite quantity. You could see on order information. If I go into here, it'll show me that needed amount and then the adjusted amount. So here you see the SPO units is 281. That was my suggested quantity, but it's including this 204 that's coming in next week. So I would want to include that and just buy when I need on top of that. So I'm just going to buy those 77 units. So it's good to set this, especially if you don't want to overbuy. And you also have, because of that, you also have that expedite list. It'll show you that expedite quantity that's there.
Stuart, we have another question. It says they are using SPO coverage, but they often see an order recommended when they have one coming in the next week or two that will cover the need. The expedite weeks are set out 18 months. Short of opening each materials planning screen, how do they avoid overbuying?
The expedite should have considered that correctly, correct? From what I'm hearing, right? If they had expedite set.
From what I'm reading, yes, that quantity should not have been recommended.
Then they should submit a ticket for that, because that is something that we look at. If you set those expedite weeks, then it says it'll open today. Yeah, if you set those expedite weeks, then it should do what it's doing here. It should go out and it should take a look at those POs that are coming in and not recommend, because otherwise you would be overbuying. That's a good question.
The other comment might be to the number of weeks that are being displayed on the hot list. If it isn't looking out as far as the expedite weeks, you might not see a recommended quantity, but that would be...
When you say you're talking the planning horizon, possibly?
Yes.
Okay, yep. Yeah, if your planning horizon is too short, then depending on the particular item, maybe you have a minimum set. But if it is too short, that's true. It might not calculate that. But
we should open a ticket for that example.
Yes, definitely. All right. The last thing I'll show is just the Expedite Hotlist. Again, this is really good because you could go to your vendor, you could export this to Excel, and then you could go to your vendor and say, where is this? You know, we need this. This is quantities that will be on back order or are currently on back order. So it's a great way to see those needed purchase orders. That I'm going to go back to, I'm sorry,
Stuart, I think one good call out.
Yeah.
Stuart, one good call out on suggested purchase order is you can change the coverage method by item or SKU. So the larger slower selling items, you might want to use something like ROP, but your faster selling items, you might want to use something like coverage.
That's a good call out. And you could change that method either in materials planning or with ROP Upload, right? Because sometimes in vendor order review, especially if you have a lot to do, it might be a little bit clunky to go in and change it there, though that's an option as well. I think materials planning is probably the best way to do it for those individual ones.
And there's also, I failed to mention that you can also access the SPO methods in the warehouse default screen.
Right.
So you can also drill down that way.
And set it there as well, right?
Exactly.
Set it or update it.
Right.
Good call out. Any more questions? I'll hand it back to Megan.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have one more polling survey before we wrap up here. So the two more questions are, the first one is, how interested are you in adding the SPO module? So this is for any of you that don't currently have it today. And then the second one is for those that do have it, what added features would you want to see within SPO? So Stuart's going to turn on that polling survey for us now. And again, we'll just give you guys a minute to respond here. The second question is an entry question, so you can type in whatever you'd like there. It's a free form answer. And then once you're done, just hit submit. And we'll take a look at them together. Again, it's nice not only for us, but for you guys just to see how other people in the user community are utilizing or different options that they'd like to see.
And those added features, this might be something that's difficult to think off the top of your head, but you could always also email us about it.
Yeah.
You know, and say these are features that we would like, or add it here.
Just wrapping up, so go ahead and submit your answers, and then we'll take a look. All right, Stuart, are you able to pull up the result?
Yeah, I think it's waiting a few more seconds for people to,
Oh, okay.
to add it. So, okay. So here is the results.
So when it comes to question 1, we have 9% at most interested, somewhat interested, and we do have about 9% at not interested. And then what features we'd like to see, I think Stuart, with that one, do we have to send those via the follow-up email? With what form? Yeah.
Yeah, are there, because I can't see here, are there answers that people
Not
added
that
to that?
I can see. Not on my email, no.
All right. Again, it's tough because it's only a small amount of time. We didn't want this to last all that long. So people can email us.
Yeah.
If they want to. So, well, thank you all. So
yeah, we appreciate it. And we'll, again, as follow-up, we'll send all of this so you can reference it later on. All right. So we'll begin to wrap up here. Our next webinar is going to be focused on managing your multiple locations with our multi-echelon solution. So kind of tying into what we discussed today here with SPO. And that is scheduled for December 2nd at 3 p.m. Eastern. All right, we appreciate you all taking the time to join us today and hope you have a great rest of your day and afternoon. And take care. Thank you.